We're live. Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
Hello.
I see we've already got Mercedes on. Mercedes Wilson says, "Congratulations, Morgan, and Happy New Year, everyone. Love you, girls," she says.
Oh, thanks, Mercy.
And thank you, everybody, for joining. This is the first of our New Year's author live chats, and I am Katherine D. Graham, and a fantasy author, and I'm here today with Morgan and Andrew and Helen, and we're going to talk about epic fantasy and indie book news and what's coming next year and answer all of your questions. So I guess we'll get started with just talking a little bit about ourselves. Helen, do you want to kick us off, and then we'll just sort of go clockwise around the window, I guess. So Helen and Andrew, and then Morgan, and I'll go last.
All right. So my name is Helen Garraway. I'm based out of the UK. I live in England, and I am an epic fantasy writer. I've written a Sentinels series, and it's currently 4 books long. So I actually published 4 books in the last year or so, and I have a 5th scheduled to drop in March. Haven't quite figured the date yet, but we're getting there. And then, of course, I've also got a paranormal fantasy coming as part of the Realm of Darkness box set, along with Katherine, which will release in October. So that's really exciting and a new venture for me. So that's a little bit about me to start us off.
So is the one in the Realm of Darkness set going to be an epic fantasy too, or sort of
it's a paranormal fantasy? I mean, I like world building, so there's still going to be world building in it. So it'll be a paranormal world building epic fantasy with angels and souls and things like that. So basically, it's a story around a world that's fractured and has people with souls and people without, and it's like how they live and how they want to try and bring the world back together. And there's one girl who can touch souls, and it's how she can help heal the world. So it's that sort of paranormal, but it has that epic touch to it, I think. So I don't think
That's
I could
exciting.
write epic fantasy, actually.
Yeah, we're in the set together, but we haven't read any of each other's works. Like, none of the authors, I think, have exchanged any work yet. So who knows?
No, I know we haven't had the chance yet, but I don't think everybody's finished them yet. That's probably why.
I'm still revising. I mean, guilty.
Yeah, I'm at like 75,000 words, so I'm almost done. So yeah, almost there. So it's good news. But it's the first book I've written to a deadline. Obviously, all of my Sentinel series have been my work, my scheduling. So I just published when I was ready, whereas this one, you have a hard deadline. So it's interesting to be writing to a deadline that's hard rather than one that I could move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're going to come back and talk a little more about book news in a bit. But Andrew, it is so good to have you here as well. I'm trying to figure out my StreamYard, y'all. I'm sorry. This is my first time doing this, so thank you for bearing with me. So, Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Andrew Meredith, and I published my first piece of fiction, Thrice, on the beginning of November. And it's been going really well, and it was, huge learning curve as my first, having spent so many years pursuing TradPub. Then I switched over during COVID and said, you know what? Let's just do this, and published Thrice, and I've got quite a few things that were already in the hopper ready to go. So I've been kind of plugging away and preparing to release that in the second half of next year.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
I am so excited for this series.
Me too.
Congratulations on getting your first self-published book out.
Thank you. Yeah, and
a lot of work. It is a
lot of work, and I released in all three versions on the same day, and recorded my own audiobook. And it was a learning curve as well, but I'm really glad I did it. And when I started it, I said, the worst that can happen is I lose a month of my life trying to record it and failing. And I did lose a month of my life because I had to re-record it a second time once I figured out what I was doing. But it was worth it because it saves me a whole lot of money for audio recording, and I enjoy performing and reading. So it was not a bad idea.
So your audiobook is narrated by you?
Yes. Yep. And I'll probably do all my books. Yeah.
I did look at it, but I just don't have the time to invest in it.
No.
Like holding down a full job and writing is more than enough for me without trying to.
Absolutely.
But I'm planning to do the audiobooks. I just think
now is the time. Like not the time like, this year, but I mean, like, now's the time in winter for me to do it, especially because I don't get any writing done in the winter. I start getting seasonal, and it's just like I can get some writing done in the morning, but it's all lackluster, and in the evenings I just don't want to do it. But if I tell myself I can go record for a couple hours, and it ends up, after editing, about 4 hours to every 1 hour of production time. So
a lot of time, isn't it?
yeah, I could pay somebody $25 an hour, or I could do it myself and not pay myself $25 an hour, 10 years from now.
Right. All right. So good to have you with us, Andrew. And I know we might hear a little more about your series coming out next year, but it is time to introduce Morgan. Morgan, I'm so glad to finally meet you in person.
I know. I feel like I've known you for so long already, so this is really nice.
Yes. The pestilence has just been something else because you connect with people, but it's always online. And as authors, we read each other's work a lot. But for the audience that's watching, we've got several people on now. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I started my self-publishing journey actually last December and published my first book, Wolves of Adolor, which is the first book in the Mark of the Hunter trilogy, last April. I have the sequel of that, The Red Maiden. The cover reveal is now live. It came out today, and I'm really excited about it. My artist did an amazing job with it. So if you want to check it out, it's on Instagram, my website, and all that good stuff. But yeah, the sequel comes out in April. So I'm now in full-blown editing phase to make sure it's all finished, because the ebook is, you can pre-order the ebook now for April. So I definitely have given myself a lot of work to get done in that time, but it'll get done. I'm also a mom of 3. I have 4 kids. I've got 3 kids, 4 years old and younger. So it's been a lot of work in both spectrums of my personal life and my writing career. So I'm surprised I'm even on here today with you guys. Thankfully, my husband was off today, so he took the kids out of the house. Otherwise, they'd be popping up on the screen.
Mine is upstairs with my 2 boys.
I'm expecting my cat to turn up.
Partners that make this happen, right? Andrew, did you have kids too?
I do. I have 2. I have a 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, my wife's out with them prepping breakfast and prepping for a New Year's Christmas extravaganza later.
Oh, how fun.
Oh, nice.
We're taking
my daughter's grown. She's 23, and she actually lives in Vancouver, and I went out to Vancouver for Christmas. I haven't seen her for 2 years, so it was lovely to get out. I've only just got back, and I had to quarantine over New Year's Eve, which is really not good. But never mind. I got my negative test, so I'm all good. I can go again.
Oh, good.
Yay!
So that's all done.
Cover looks great, by the way,
So
Morgan.
I think I've rearranged our window.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, she did such an amazing job. I mean, she took what was all scrambled up here. She took my like, hey, I'm thinking it looks like this, and she turned it into something amazing. When I saw it, I was like crying. I was so excited. So, like I said, she took my jumbled mess and turned it into something beautiful. So I'm really excited with it.
Cover artists are great. There's just something special about, here's what I have in my head, but it doesn't make any sense. Can you make it something pretty for me?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many talented artists out there. I'm lucky I found one who enjoys my writing and my work. But yeah, I mean, I look at artists all across Instagram and I'm like, I wish I could do that. But, I'm just glad I know people like that.
It's quite amazing, isn't it? Because when I first did my first cover, I mean, obviously, Sentinels Awaken, this one is my first ever book, and it's such a learning curve, all the things that you need to do at the time. And when I first met the cover designer and he started drawing things in front of me on the screen, I mean, it was just amazing just to see a cover come to life with just talking about the book and what it meant to me, and him picking up the scene that he thought would be the most impactful on the front cover. It's it's nice. It's a nice memory to have of the journey to releasing your first book.
Yeah.
Aunt Nay Cryer says, just finished Wolves of Adolor. Love it.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you liked
So-
it. That's still such a weird, surreal feeling when somebody actually reads your work and then they like it. Because when I first started, I was like, I don't know if I should even do this. My husband was really the one in my corner saying, like, this is your dream. You need to do it. And I was like, yeah, but what if no one likes it? What if everybody hates it? And he's like, well, if you like it, that's you're writing for yourself. And I'm like, oh, well, that's true. I mean, I know we all want people to approve of our work and love what we do. And I've been pleasantly surprised to see that there are a lot more people who love my work than don't. So it's been really an encouraging year for me, at least. So
Ignore the naysayers.
yeah.
You just got to accept that your book is not going to be for everybody, but it's finding those readers who are going to love it and really be promoting and speaking to them rather than the audience who are never going to like it. So
Yeah. And I've also realized just reading other reviews, not just for my book, but I mean, I read a lot and I'll put out reviews and, try to encourage other writers as well. And there's so many people out there who just find reasons not to like things. So I'm just like, oh, y'all just gonna find any reason to not like something. So that's the main reason I'm just like, I'm like, if they don't like these amazing authors, then I'll take that as well. That's okay.
I mean, I think this year has been so good for me because I'm a flop to not author. So I self-published a couple books I wrote back in college. Before I became an editor, I didn't really edit much. I tried to self-edit it and threw it out and didn't have it professionally formatted or anything. I put 2 books out and they both got awful reviews, which they deserved. The plot had so many holes and it was filled with typos and it was awful. But when I decided to relaunch and bring back writing again after writing something 10 years later, my husband was like, this is special. You need to put out About the Twisted Fate. And I was just like, I don't know. I had taken a year and all I did was edit. I didn't write anything because I was like, everything I write is awful. And so when I decided to put it out, I was like, no, I'm going to keep my pen name and hopefully it'll show other people that you start somewhere, you can still get better, you can learn from it, you can grow through it. And I went and got myself some editors because now that I'm an editor, I'm like, you can't effectively self-edit your own work all the way through because of page blindness. You're going to miss errors and stuff. And when Val started coming out and it got 4s and 5-star reviews, I was like, this is not right. This is not my book. And the imposter syndrome was so real. And then when it won the award, one of the finalist awards this year in the Next Generation Indie Book Award last year, I guess, I was just like, this is real. People do like this book. And it was just overwhelming. And I'm so humbled and thankful to the readers for giving my books a second chance and giving me a second chance all these years later. It's exciting. But I've learned to take constructive criticism so much better now that I've gone this long. And maybe it's because I'm an editor. If somebody's like, I don't like that it's in first person, or I don't like this, or I don't like that, it's like, okay, this is helpful because it helps other readers know, oh, well, I don't like first person books either. And then they don't read it and it prevents more negative reviews. Or it helps somebody go, well, I do like first person. So that sounds like just the book for me. And so I don't know. I feel like even the bad reviews have good to them most of the time.
I always think of reviews as they're sort of like matchmaking. It's a way of ensuring that the right reader finds your book. So talking about things that that people don't like as well as what they do like helps the right reader find it. And I think any review is really valuable. And as an author, we just have to accept that not everybody is going to like it. So any review is good. The more reviews, the better.
So here, Loven asked, what advice would you give to anyone aspiring to self-publish a book? And she says, you are all so inspiring. Thank you so much. I'm going to defer to Helen for a minute here because, Helen, you have published way more books than I have. So, and then
I've done 4.
Morgan, you're a step ahead of me too.
And I must admit, I mean, Sentinels Awaken I published in October 2020, and that was my first book. And I've been writing my series, of which there are 7. I started in 2016, and I wrote 7 books. Somehow they all just went bleh, and they all came out, and I have 7 books. So now, since 2019, I've been editing and working my way through these books. And I would say the most eye-opening thing from from writing my first book. And the best thing you can do is to get a development editor for your first book. You do not know what you don't know. And until you put your book in front of a professional who can give you constructive advice and really make you look at your work objectively, that is only going to improve your writing. And there is so much involved in writing a book and ensuring that you're going to have the right components, that a reader is going to be hooked, that they're really going to engage with your characters, that the world is going to be visible in their heads so that they can really enjoy and appreciate it. That can only make your books better. And even if you only did it once, I mean, I only did it for my first book, but the amount of feedback that I got, it improved my book exponentially. It was just well worth the investment, and it's just advice you can use over and over for each book. And then each of my other books, I've got a copy editor. So I write instinctively, and I think my plots are pretty strong. My grammar is terrible. I admit it. Right. Grammar, commas, I cannot get them right. So I have to have a copy to go through and just correct my grammar, because that's my downfall. But it is what it is. I accept it. And I'd rather have a copy editor go through and just pick up my faults. and it can only, as again, it's worth the investment, and you learn so much. And over time, my grammar is getting better, but over 4 books, so hopefully it's getting better. But there are still things that you're going to get wrong. So the more people that you can get eyes on your book, the better. And the other thing I would say is it takes more time than you think it will. So give yourself plenty of time. Don't put yourself under pressure. I did that, and I was panicking because I thought I'd have to move my Amazon date, and the Amazon don't like you moving dates around. So give yourself enough runway, and just be aware it does take longer than you think it does to publish a book.
That's great advice. Morgan, you have anything to add to that?
My husband gave me this little bit of advice. I mean, my husband isn't right, but he's in my corner. Like, he's my partner and everything, right? So I was a new mom. I just had my first child, and I was trying to get my book written, Wolves of Adolor. And I was getting really frustrated because I couldn't get it done the way I wanted to get it done, with a new baby and all these new changes. And this one thing he said to me has stuck with me, and I'm about to publish my 3rd book. It's just 5 minutes a day. If you will put 5 minutes a day into doing what you love, 5 minutes will turn into 10 minutes, which one sentence will turn into a paragraph, which will turn into a chapter, which will turn into a manuscript. So he's like, if this is something that you really want to do, just put a little bit of time in and you'll see it grow. And I just took it and ran with it. And now in April, my 3rd book will be coming out. So if you're doing what you love and you feel like you can't dedicate a ton of time, a lot of time will add up if you just put in consistent work every day. So some days I can only, with 3 kids running around, I can only get 10 minutes of writing in, but that's still 10 minutes of writing that I didn't have the day before. So that's what I would tell people, like, put in consistent time and you'll get there.
Yeah. How about you, Andrew?
So I would say take some time to learn yourself.
That's a good one.
I spent 6 months trying to work myself up to writing my first book. And during that 6 months, I figured out what my pace was. How much can I write when I'm cruising? How much can I write when I'm not feeling good? And learning myself and realizing, okay, what is my pacing? So whether it's a long 3,500 to 5,000 word chapter that just takes a time to read through versus a quick paced, 1,500 to 2,500 word chapter, which one are you more comfortable with, or are you comfortable with each one, and what equates to your personal rhythm? And if you learn that, then you're much better at pacing yourself, at least as an outliner. I can't really speak for pantsers because it stresses me out to no end. But when if you like outlining, knowing your pace lets you really guesstimate your word count a lot easier, and then you have something to strive for. Because if you don't know what your pace is, then you don't know what you're capable of putting out if you decide to rapid release or not rapid release, because that might be a bad idea for your pacing. And then I would say the other huge thing is get a huge group of beta readers. Because there's no better way to inoculate yourself to bad criticism than having 20 people read your book, because then you're just used to people giving you good criticism, and it's also easier for you to disregard vitriolic criticism as well. And that prepares you for bad reviews, and also prepares you just to be a better writer. And you hear these famous authors who are like, well, I only have 2 people who read my book before I give it to my agent. I'm like, I want to tear my hair out. I'm like, how do you know it's any good? And how are you going to be ready to hear any kind of bad review once your book is out? And maybe they're just not looking at them at all, but are they also improving? And beta readers help with that.
What I like about beta reader feedback, not that I'm biased in any way as a developmental editor or beta reader, is that the negative feedback is always constructive. Like there's usually pointed, I don't like this because, or this doesn't work here because sometimes when you're reading casually for fun, you're not thinking about why you don't like something. It's just like, oh, I don't like it. And so when you leave the review, it's like, this book isn't for me, and you leave it a bad review. But a beta reader knows to look for those specific details. So Andrew, we've actually got a question for you, wondering if Andrew has the sequel to Thrice coming anytime soon. We want more.
Yeah, that's going to be coming out in November. So 1 year from the date of the first one. It's just finishing up with my first run of beta readers. And now I have some work to do and just a couple chapters that were a little too world building. So I'll be fixing that over the winter while I'm recording my other epic series as well.
That's exciting. So I guess that's a good segue into, tell us a little bit about the books that you guys have coming out this year. Morgan, you went last on the introduction, so I'm going to let you go first, and I'll go last again. We'll go sort of reverse order this time. So Morgan, Andrew, Helen, tell us a little bit about the books that you have coming out.
Okay, so I mentioned The Red Maiden. That's the sequel to Wolves of Adolor. That's coming out in April. And I'm going to be starting on the last installment of the Mark of the Hunter series or trilogy. And that is, I'm sharing the title with y'all for the first time, The Raven and the Wolf. So that's going to be my last book in that trilogy, which I'm already sad that it's going to be ending because I told one of my best friends, I told one of my best friends yesterday, I was like, I think I'm going to go through like a minor depression when I have to say goodbye because they've been with me for years. They started as this little idea and they've turned into this reality at least in my head, but after the trilogy, I do have a duology that I'm going to be going into, at least fingers crossed I'll be able to get into. And that's going to be another fantasy, but it's going to be more of a fantasy meets Western meets dragons.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. So the way I'm describing it to people is it's Six of Crows meets dragons in the West. So
Awesome.
That's where I'm going to go next. But I'm really excited about The Red Maiden. I'm hoping that everybody likes it, just like Wolves was really well received. But yeah, that's what I'm going to be filling my year with, is all of that.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
How about you, Andrew? Tell us a little bit about the books that you've got coming out next year.
So the sequel to Thrice, which is called Fourscored, is going to be coming out in November, in all 3 formats. And then starting in July, the first 6 books of the Collation Legacy are going to start coming out, one every month through December. So I'll release those, and that's an epic cycle with lots of good POVs, a couple of mercenaries, a paladin. Every book's going to focus on a different POV, all heading towards one climax. But it's going to be a very long road. It's not just 6 books. But I know my pacing, and so I know I can. Now that I am not focusing on trying to sell the book, now I'm focusing on publishing the book. I'm working towards probably about 6 books a year will be coming out from here through 2030. So second half of the year will be my hot time every year, and I'll spend winter and spring polishing everything off. So I'm very excited because this is the kid book from when I was 15. Wrote it terribly 10 years ago, trashed it. And then came back 10 years later in 2017 and said, okay, same world, same characters, but everything was just torn down to nothing. I killed my darlings and resurrected them in my own way.
Fantastic.
It's so exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
And, you know, I think I'm just going to drop in there. One of the hardest things about being an editor is finding a truly amazing book and not being able to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I will be so excited when this series comes out.
Me too. Yeah.
So Helen, tell us a little bit about what's coming for your books next year or this year.
Yeah, so
This is
Sentinels
2022.
Yeah, I've got 3, which is trying to show you. So there's 3 out, 3 big books. And there was when I wrote the third, Sentinels Justice. So Sentinels Awaken was the first one. And really it's my fantasy world is pretty set in a medieval environment. And 3,000 years ago, the goddess sundered the stone and brought down a veil of protection, which took all magic away. But magic is coming back, and she needs a new captain to help her save the world, sort of thing. So it's sort of a story about his journey to understanding what being the ladies' captain is, and waking the Sentinels, her personal guards, who she couldn't take with her when she left the world. So they've been sleeping in these trees. So the first book is Awakening, the second one is Rising, and the third one is Justice. Which is sort of the climax to the opening trilogy, but the series continues. And then in December, I released a novella, Sentinels Recovery, which wasn't in my plan at all, but I physically couldn't fit it in to book 3. There's no physical way to get the character back to the place where this story takes place. So that was quite interesting in that I ended up writing I call it a novella, but it's 55,000 words, which is actually a book. So I ended up writing an extra one. And then my next book comes out in spring. I haven't quite finalized the date, but that's Sentinels Across Time. And it's like 2 years after the end of the final confrontation. And this one is more of a time slip, which has been quite interesting because it's been really quite fun to actually write the history of where the Sentinels came from and how they ended up in the trees and why they were awoken. And so I had to write the beginnings as well as the current in order to do the time slip for my main character to move between the two. And so that's called Sentinels Across Time. And in writing that one, of course, I wrote the origins. So Sentinels Origins is almost the prequel because I had to write the whole origin of how they became Sentinels in order to write Sentinels Across Time. So those are 2 books that I hope to get out in 2022. Definitely Sentinels Across Time. And then, of course, I have Soul Breather, which is part of the Realm of Darkness trilogy, anthology, which is going to be a new series, which will be the Soul Mist series. So that one will be coming out in October. It just depends if I have time in between that and doing the audiobook for Sentinels Awaken to get the Sentinels Origin out as well. So lots to do in 2022. And as I say, you just got to put your goals down and just see which ones you can hit. So I know the audiobook will happen and Sentinels Across Time will happen, and so will Soul Breather. Sentinels Origin is out there. We'll work on it and we'll see if it hits the end of the year or not. But yeah,
we're gonna cross fingers.
It's such fun. I absolutely love it. I can't believe I never did this earlier. You know, I only started writing in 2016, and my catalyst was, unfortunately, my mum passed away and my daughter went off to university, and I suddenly had an empty house and a lot of time, and it was like all of a sudden I started writing, and I just so wish I wrote earlier. You know, it's just, I just think sometimes there's just the right time for you to put pen to paper and start writing. But now I can't stop, and I have so many ideas bubbling in my head. It's capturing them all before they disappear. And then having time to do something with them. But I have a lot of other ideas and other books bubbling. It's just Sentinels is front of mind at the moment, just to get that series out and complete. But it's I love it. I recommend, if you're writing and you love writing, just go for it. It's if you're enjoying it and take the time to learn your craft and learn the process, it's absolutely worthwhile, and you should definitely, you know, put pen to paper and go for it.
That's right. So I see a couple questions, and I'm going to pull those up before I do anything else. Are beta readers provided by the publisher, or do you all have to find them? We are indie authors, so none of us have a traditional publisher that I'm aware of, unless y'all have something to share. I don't. So for the sake of time, very briefly, since I'm a beta reader, you've got a few different options. You can find some author writing groups and exchange beta reads. You can go hire a developmental editor to do a professional beta read through a site like Fiverr or Upworks. Or You can go to your friends and family. Not always recommended, but you can. If they are genuinely honest with feedback, then that might be a great way for you to find some too. And on the beta reading front, to Andrew's point earlier, if you're going to publish traditional, you might want to get them beta read, the one you're going to submit at least, before you submit it to a publisher to know how it's going to be received. And then let's you guys answer this one. How did your writing paths lead you all to fantasy novels?
For me, I read a lot of fantasy. I mean, I love it, and I grew up on it. And my mum was a bookworm, and we read anything and everything. But she loved fantasy, and that's really where my love lies. And my influences, I would say, are people like David Eddings in the Belgarian and the Malloreon series, Anne McCaffrey, the Pern series, Michelle Segara, the Cast-In series, things like that. So they're all long-winded, epic, large stories, and that's where I came from. So I wrote what I enjoy. So I wrote it for me. I didn't want to read it on my laptop anymore, so I decided to investigate self-publishing and decided to publish them so I could read it as a book. That's why I think I published in the first place, was just so I could hold my book in my hand and read it rather than reading it on a laptop.
How about you, Morgan and Andrew?
So I remember when I was a kid watching, I was like 11 or 12, and there go my dogs. I was 11 or 12, and The Lord of the Rings was starting to come out in the movies, and I was like really into watching them, and I just fell in love with the genre. So any kind of fantasy book I could get my little hands on, I was reading them. And then I found something that kind of sparked this need to write in me, and that was most of the books I was reading were all about the male protagonist, the hero who came to save the damsel in distress, or there's just a woman as a token love interest.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I didn't relate to them, because I'm not a man, trying to save a woman. So I decided to start writing my own epic fantasy that featured females as protagonists and antagonists. So in Wolves of Adolor, my females, they're these strong, morally gray females. One's a hero, one's a villain. And I wanted little girls to be able to relate to these women, because as people, we're not just good or bad. We have the capacity to be both good and bad. And I really wanted to play with that. I really wanted to play with a villain who wasn't just like, haha, villain. I want to have a villain where you're just like, they actually make some valid points. Right. How did they get to be the villain? They're not the villain in their own story. So that's why I decided to write the Mark of the Hunter trilogy. And I just love fantasy. That's what I read mostly. And I mean, my shelves are full of fantasy books that I've read or have to read. And it's just an escape. I think that's what people love about fantasy movies, books, games, is that you can escape the real world and go into a different creative universe. So,
Andrew, how did you end up writing fantasy?
I was raised by two nerds too, on David Eddings and Dragonlance, and then in the 90s, Robin Hobb, when I started working at bookstores, and took a year off from reading almost any fantasy in 2009, and then someone at Barnes & Noble I was reading a bunch of other genres at that point. And someone else at Barnes & Noble that I was working at in Bellevue gave me Mistborn to read. And that just launched me right back into fantasy. And I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to start writing my book that I had, tried to submit to Tor when I was 12. It was garbage, and it was insanely David Eddings derivative. But I was 12. And so that's kind of my path, is just that I was raised by nerds and read a lot of that old fantasy, and then started in on the new fantasy, and I've just I've just been loving what's been coming out lately. Yeah.
All right, so we got one last fast pop question, and then I'll sort of share what news I've got, and we will call it a morning, because this has been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, wrong one. Sorry, guys. When you write, do you prefer longhand or typing? I am a typer and a pantser, and whatever comes out, comes out.
So I have notebooks filled with Scribble Scrabble, and I am an outliner. Whether I stick to it or not, it depends on, the flow. When I get into a writing flow, it might change, but I definitely have plot structure outlines, and I transfer from paper to typing. And then of course that also evolves, but if I don't have pen and paper, it's not happening.
Yeah, I when I first started writing, I was longhand. I had lots of notebooks like yourself. I have notebooks filled, and I always have a notebook by the bed because the ideas always come as soon as you close your eyes. And if you don't write them down, you lose them. So make sure you have a notebook by the bed. But as I've gone on, I'm more typing now. I do, if I get ideas, I'll grab a book and I'll write them down just for speed. But I tend to just type straight into my laptop now, pretty much.
And I write on Scrivener. I use Scrivener and whatever else is nearby. So I will often have multiple outlines built into a spreadsheet versus by pencil on paper that I'll write it up and then throw it away and then write it up and throw it away. But if I'm typing it, I know I don't throw anything away. Everything just gets pushed into a different bucket. I use Scrivener. I've really been enjoying it.
Yeah, I've got Scrivener. I just never got to use it. I've just keep writing. I just keep writing my laptop.
I used to write in a notebook like Morgan. All my first drafts would go in the notebook. And still today, if I know I'm not going to be home a lot, the notebook comes out. I've got a giant tote of notebooks, but few of them make it to the computer typing stage. And one of those books, actually, one of my first ones is Splitting Dawn, which is my book that's going in the Realm of Darkness set with Helen's. And the Realm of Darkness set just launched on Amazon today for pre-order, and they've marked it down to 99 cents. And it's 40 full-length novels.
Wow.
And I'm just honored to be a part of it. But Splitting Dawn is going to be just one of my first dark fantasy romances. For those who know my books, I typically write romance as a side plot, and I'm like all about epic high fantasy. But Splitting Dawn just sort of snuck up out of nowhere, and there's vampire elves in it and demon kings. And it actually takes my Splitting Worlds series of novellas, and this will be the first full novel. And then Starfire Express is an adventure portal fantasy that's going to come out this year about a girl who gets on the train, college girl, and she's the only human in a train full of monsters. She got on the wrong train, and they're all celebrating the apprehension of the notorious godmother who they're taking back to the dragon overlords, and she gets swept up in like a Fey rebellion against the dragons. So yeah, that's so cool. That's what I've got going this year. Sort of like Helen, I've got more things that I want to do, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do them. So I'm just taking things one day at a time. What led you to choose to record your own? Andrew, I think this is referring to you. I know that most of us have audiobooks. I got a narrator through the ACX. I don't know where you got yours, Helen.
I'm the same. I trawled through ACX looking for a voice that I liked, and then I got a couple of samples done. They did a couple of auditions, and then I shared it with a couple of folks that I know like my books and asked them, would this voice work for you? Obviously I liked it, but I want to make sure some of the readers that I know who love my book liked it as well. So they listened to it as well, and they chose the same one I did out of the 3 options. So that's how I got my narrator, and hopefully he'll be with me through the series. Fingers crossed.
I got mine through their plus. So the ACX has a plus option where you can do a little bit of money per hour, and then you still split the royalties. And that's where I found Helen David for mine, and she's been fantastic. And I, like you, Helen, I hope that I can use her again. Although if I do it again, I may try to pay the full amount out of pocket. It's just hard being a debut novelist and a self-published author, knowing how much interest was going to be in the audiobook. So Andrew's is probably, yours is pretty cost effective too. I guess mine is your time.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the time, and I think it cost me $300 for a good mic, for a Blue Yeti. Blue Yeti. Yeah, Blue Yeti is, I think it was $250, and so that's all the investment I had to do. And you can use what is it called? There's a free editing software you can use on your PC. That's just it's great. Just the standard. And I took that as advice from my wife's audiobook narrator. She uses that, and I'm drawing a blank on what it's called.
All right. Well, we have had so many people join. I'm so thankful to everybody who took the time out of your New Year's Day to come celebrate with us. And thank you, Andrew and Helen and Morgan, for getting together on the live. I know we've gone a little bit over, but this has just been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
It's been great. Thank you for organizing it. Yeah.
It was nice meeting y'all too.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. It's just so good to get to meet people face to face. And for those who are watching who don't know, we are doing the New Year's lives all day today and tomorrow. Our next live is actually in about 20 minutes. We're doing the court intrigue fantasy with authors like Katrina and Lewis, whose book was actually featured in the Nerdy Book Box. And so, yeah, really excited to see what they've got coming. So if you don't want to miss anything, subscribe and hit the bell and you'll get a notification when the next video goes up. Most of my YouTube videos, which were lacking last year because I was like, oh, this is what it means to be an author, are going to be about writing and publishing self and through the press, since I own a small press. And that way, hopefully, we can all share more advice through the year with some amazing authors like these. So
yeah.
Thank you all. I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
All righty. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New
Happy New Year.